You're listening to a fight against free kill laws from AMP Media Production Studio.
Welcome to the Fight Against Free Kill Laws with Ed Salazar, where we give a voice to those who have suffered firsthand from medical malpractice. In Florida, families devastated by medical negligence are left without justice because of a law many don't even know exists. Florida's free kill law prevents families from holding doctors accountable. These are real stories with real loss and no justice. Contact Ed at 561-239-2417 or visit afreekill.com. Today we uncover the truth, share real stories, and demand change.
Good evening, friends, and thank you again for tuning into our podcast. As all of you probably are too well aware of, the bill died again in the Senate. It was never even brought to vote. So these horrible laws are going to go into their 37th year. We are going to continue the fight. We are coming up with some new strategies. We have a guest this evening, a very, very powerful story. If we can, let's bring Katie Cowart, RN. Can we bring her in, Katie?
Hey there.
Katie, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for being willing to share your story. I read here the summary you sent, and it's heart-wrenching. It's horrible, and it's preventable. So my understanding is that this happened in the greater Tampa area?
Yes.
Okay. Well, go ahead and tell us a little bit about your father and how this situation came to be.
Okay. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the work that you're putting into this community and for everything that you're doing. So thank you for allowing me to be your guest. My dad is a 76-year-old man. His name's Alan. He was going in for a laparoscopic mitral valve replacement. This was in December, just recently, of 2025. He has no real major pre-existing health conditions. He walked into the surgery. This was something that he had hoped to eliminate taking naps in the middle of the day. He was a very active gentleman. He kept bees. He had a dog. He traveled. He was a thriving, man in his 70s. So he wanted to eliminate taking naps in the middle of the day. That regurgitation he was having from that mitral valve prolapse was kind of just giving him a little bit of a midday zap. He went in on the 22nd of December. As I stated, it was supposed to be a laparoscopic surgery. They were going to incise through the ribs right here, kind of like the mid-axillary line, like your armpit area. We were told that the surgery should be about 2.5 hours, 3 hours. So my sister and I accompanied him that morning to surgery. We met with all of the providers. Everyone explained kind of this was a pretty routine surgery, nothing too major. If everything goes as planned, it'll be, a couple days in the hospital and then home to recover. So we were all fully anticipating a very short stay. We waited in the waiting room around the 2.5 hour, 3 hour mark. We were getting continuous text messages from the operating room saying everything's going as planned. Everything's going as planned. So we were very reassured during that time. It was probably around the 4 or 5 hour mark that we started to get a little nervous, but we were continuing to receive those text messages reassuring us that everything was going as planned. We did ask to speak to one of the nurses there in the operating room, which she came out to chat with us and reassured us sometimes these things just run a little longer depending on the anatomy of the heart and just kind of the challenges that they see there while they're doing the operation, that it could be a little longer. So, she encouraged us to go get something to eat, and we were to come back and just check back in. Around the 6 and 7 hour mark, we were beginning to feel that something was very amiss. We put in a request with the kind of waiting room attendant to please have someone from the operating room get in touch with us or just an update, because this was well over the expected amount of time. We did not hear from anyone. It was around the 8 and 9 hour mark that my sister was really going hard, asking, we have to speak to someone. Someone has to tell us what's going on. And the the ER waiting room attendant, not ER, I'm sorry, OR waiting room attendant, she called back and she advocated for us and said, someone has to come talk to this family. This is too much. And I don't want to share her name, but she was an angel to really get someone out for us. It was at that point that the surgeon who was operating on our father came into the waiting room. Unfortunately, he was saturated in my dad's blood from about the knees down. So that was a lot as a first glance that we knew something had gone terribly awry. He was wearing, operating scrubs and I think Crocs that were again fully saturated. He told us that something had there was an issue, and the words that he used was a tube moved. The tube moved. And I'm not an operating room nurse, but I understand anatomy. I'm a nurse, so
You are an RN,
I didn't.
right?
I'm an RN, right? So I
Right.
don't. Well, that's not my specialty. I do feel like I can understand some of the logistics. And he said the tube move, which resulted in a 3-inch laceration to our father's lower right lobe of his lung. Which it's cascaded into an unfortunate long series of events that happened. But what in short he thought, or he said that he thought, was that the ET tube
Yeah.
lacerated the lung. At some point during surgery, it was not noticed until they began to reinflate his lungs after the surgery that they noticed copious amounts of frothy secretions coming from the incision site. And that was, what was supposed to be a 2.5-hour surgery turned into a 12-day ordeal with our father, unfortunately.
Okay, for the viewers, real quick, the endotracheal tube, the breathing tube, the tube itself is only about 12 inches long in total.
Correct.
And
Right.
it goes in through the mouth, through the trachea, and it's supposed to ideally sit in an area called the carina, which is right above where the two main stem bronchi meet. Okay,
Correct.
so, but the surgeon told you that the tube had gone all the way down through
Correct.
the entire bronchial tree to
Right.
the right base and
Yes.
resulted in a 3-inch laceration.
Correct.
That
There's no planet which we live on that would be a thing that happens.
agreed.
So, and we just continued to kind of question it, like, tell me again what happened, tell me again what happened. And he stuck by the tube moved. It's even in the chart, because I wanted immediate access to his chart. I had access anyway, so I was able to pull up the surgical note straight away. And it's charted, suspected involvement of an ET tube, the laceration related to an ET
A
tube
3-inch
moving.
laceration.
3-inch laceration. Yeah. So like I said, it cascaded into a series of events that was nearly impossible for anyone to come back from. It's just inconceivable, and there was never really any accountability. We, during our father's stay, we did get a chance to kind of continue to question the ET tube theory.
Yeah.
We did get a chance to meet with the head of anesthesia, not the person who was there in the room with our father, but it was someone who was the head of anesthesia. And he explained to us that there just anatomically was no way. With a movement of a tube, it's a millimeter movement, micro movements to adjust to the patient, not large sweeping motions that would cause a 3-inch laceration on top of the mechanics of that with that particular type of machinery and the things that you're using, the procedures, they're not rigid in that way.
Right. Well,
Yes.
it seems like so this was the head of anesthesia that came out to talk to you, not the actual anesthesiologist.
Correct. We never were able to actually speak to that person, but yes,
Well,
the
that
head of
person was
anesthesia.
probably incensed that the surgeon was trying to throw
Yes.
him under the bus.
Correct. He was very surprised. Our initial meeting with him, he came in and was very kind of easy peasy and was like, sometimes, things can happen and, you can have like a small abrasion from the tube or a little soreness or hoarseness post surgery, which I think is, anybody would expect that would be common, if you're putting something in your throat. But it was very clear that he wasn't familiar with our dad's case. So my sister and I wanted him to become familiar. So we said, why don't you take a minute, get familiar with his case and come back? We're going to be here. We were there 12 hours a day, every day. At that time, it was about 10 minutes. He came back and he had an armful of all of the equipment used in our father's procedure. He was gracious enough to take us into the staff room. We opened up all of the tubing. We felt it. We saw how the stylets worked. We were able to kind of feel the equipment, and he reassured us that that is just not
And the
possible.
stylet is the rod that goes inside the tube to help make it rigid
Yes,
enough so that they can direct it to get it in the right location.
correct.
But there again,
Correct.
it's not long enough.
No, it just could not possibly do. And, due to the anatomy. So, as again, we're kind of pondering this situation, I did ask the surgeon, can you tell me if the laceration, if the edges were approximated or were they rigid? Meaning, does it look like a clean slice or does it look like a rip?
A traumatic
He
tear.
was not able to
Yeah.
answer those questions. I wanted to know if the laceration ran parallel to the ribs, kind of in between there. You have your rib, and then that's what feels like a little bit of like a squishy part in between the rib, that intercostal muscle there. Did it run parallel to that? Was it perhaps a slice that was done trying to get into doing the procedure? Is my suspicion. And then when they
You're
opened him
still a
up,
long way from the heart there.
correct, you're on the opposite side of the body. But if they have deflated the lung to get to the body, and if it was already deflated and he cut it, was the body cavity then filling up with blood during the time that they were operating, and then upon them inflating him back up, they were able to see those frothy secretions. He did struggle with, obviously, loads of secretions inside his lungs for the bulk of his stay. I don't think he ever really got on top of that. There was respiratory was involved heavily with suctioning him frequently and trying to get those lungs cleared up.
So what happened post op?
You know, by the time we finally got to see Dad, it was probably 3 in the morning. We came in at 5 the previous morning. He was on an ECMO machine, which is the highest form of life support. He was on
Hmm.
the double pass ECMO. He was also on a vent at that time. Those were the two things that were sustaining him. Just profuse swelling of the face. He was almost unrecognizable.
Yeah. Well, just for the sake of the viewers, ECMO, it stands for extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, and it's a technique to actually bypass the lungs and oxygenate. You have a membrane system that oxygenates the blood and then pumps it back into the body. And I suppose because there was a tear in the lung that they wanted to try to suture, they would have to keep the lung inactive in order for it
Right,
to repair. So that's
right.
what they were trying to do with the ECMO.
They were trying to do that with the ECMO. At some point during that first 24 hours, I believe, they did take him back to operate again. They opened him back up because they wanted to try to suture the lung. Initially, the lung was just patched. They were just trying to patch him up. They left the incision in his chest was left open but packed so they could get back in there without having to like continue to open up sutures. Um, they went back in, they sutured the lung, which they had hope would take in terms of getting the fluid off of his lungs, kind of create a seal. They did several what they called washouts, which were to kind of, so your body reads its own system. It's a self-regulating system. So when your body begins to create clots, your clotting system then says, we don't need any more clots. But what was happening is Dad's body had coagulated blood within his body cavity, which his body read as a clot, but really he was still bleeding and needed to clot. So they were taking him in, washing out his whole cavity to free his body of those clots to try to stimulate the clotting factors for the injuries to the lung. I feel like they were just chasing their tail the whole time. I think he did 3 or 4 washouts total,
How
which
long
is
was he?
trauma.
How long did this go on?
He was in the ICU for 12 days. And it was continuous washouts, and every time there was a washout, you have to come back from that, be resituated back in your room, reconnected to everything. He was on tremendous amounts of clotting agents. He received so much donated blood. So
Yeah.
as a, selfless plug here, if you're able to donate blood, please do, because it does sustain life. We were gifted from so many people who donate. He was giving clotting factors, just so many medications, but every time he left the room, he had to come back in, and that was another couple hours to re-get him back onto everything he was on. So we were there a lot, 12 hours at a stretch, usually.
What a horrific experience. I mean,
It was terrible.
I my heart's with you. I can relate.
Thank you. Yeah, it just it never seemed to end. I felt like at one point we were rounding a corner with him. They were going to try to step him off ECMO. They took him back for an additional procedure to include, they wanted to prepare him to have dialysis in his jugular. That's where they wanted everything to kind of go through. And then they were going to do a procedure to bypass his atrium and ventricle on the right side, I believe, just to give it a little rest, because everything started to get very taxed. His heart was trying to work very hard. It was wearing out. So they were trying to create these bypass methods to help his body rest, to include his kidneys with dialysis. But during that procedure, he crashed twice, and we really never made progress after that. It was only a steady decline of his functions and his body systems.
No, Katie, I'm so sorry.
Thank you. It was pretty horrific, and yeah.
Well, in the notes you sent me, when you said what his cause of death was finally listed as,
Right.
tell
Yeah.
us a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
When you receive a death certificate, I've never received a death certificate before. I did not know what to anticipate it would say. I didn't realize that there could be that many lines for things to be listed. So many commas used. It wasn't just, oh, his heart, or oh, the mitral valve didn't take. It was the laceration was listed, in addition to virtually every other system of his body had given out at
Do
that
do you
time.
mind if I
Liver.
go through it real quick?
No, please do. I don't have it pulled up here. Yes, you can read it.
Okay, well, first and foremost, it was cardiogenic shock. Okay, that seems reasonable, what they did to him. Biventricular failure, respiratory failure, right lung laceration, renal failure, liver failure, anemia, thrombocytopenia, metabolic encephalopathy, pneumonia, hemoptysis. But never was there anything about medical error.
No, nothing.
Right.
Nothing. And when we would speak, we did make a point to meet with the team, because I feel like they were asking us what the plan was. And we really didn't understand from their perspective what the plan was. What was the long term here? What did this look like for him? What was being done to him? At what point are we doing things for him? And then when you transition to doing things to him, we just needed to understand from a medical perspective, because in that point, I'm not a nurse, I'm a daughter. We met with the whole team, and the surgeon was present, who was the head of this whole thing. And at one point, he just says, there are risks with surgery. There was never any, from that particular doctor, there was never any accountability or I'm so sorry, or it was just, this is, they made it sound like it's an implied risk.
Do you mind if I share something else that you sent in your notes?
No, go ahead, please.
Okay, the medications that were being administered to maintain his blood pressure caused tissue necrosis, caused tissue death to his hands bilaterally, both hands. Had he survived, he would have had to undergo a bilateral amputation. In the end, we were not even able to hold his hand when he transitioned to heaven. The person at the crematorium was able to get only one fingerprint off one finger. That is a very somber, sad, it's just a terrible note. The memories that you got of your father then are in your heart. Katie? Are you still with me, Katie? Okay, we've lost Katie's connection. We'll get back to it in just a minute. Okay, also in Katie's notes, she said that at this point they are still waiting on autopsy results. Okay, so we're talking what, 3 months, two, maybe 3 months since this horrible situation happened. They still do not have an official autopsy report. One thing that Katie did was absolutely brilliant, and I'm going to carry on with this. She sent, she's Catholic. Katie and her family are Catholic, and they sent a letter to the bishop of the Archdiocese of Pensacola, and he sent them a response. I'll just read a few things from that response. Thank you for your letter of January 28th, in which you wrote about Florida's horribly named free kill law. I hadn't heard about this law, and I was very troubled by your father's death in connection to this law. He goes on to say that all of the Florida bishops met for their annual meeting shortly after he had received this letter, and he brought it up in discussion, and they talked about it as well as their opposition to this law. Now that's big, folks. So, excuse me? Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to take a quick commercial break. I'm sorry.
Welcome back to the Fight Against Free Kill Laws, where we expose the truth about medical malpractice and the families left behind. Under Florida's free kill law, if a victim is over 25 and unmarried, their death means nothing in the eyes of the law. No accountability, no justice. If this happened to your loved one, would you accept silence?
You're listening to a Fight Against Free Kill Laws from AMP Media Production Studio.
Welcome back to the Fight Against Free Kill Laws, where we expose the truth about medical malpractice and the families left behind. Under Florida's free kill law, if a victim is over 25 and unmarried, their death means nothing in the eyes of the law. No accountability, no justice. If this happened to your loved one, would you accept silence?
You're listening to a Fight Against Free Kill Laws from AMP Media Production Studio.
All right, folks. I'm sorry for that interruption. But as I was saying, in this letter from the bishop in Pensacola, excuse me, their opposition to this law, and they indicated that their advocate in the legislature would be speaking with us. That he was very knowledgeable about this sort of thing, and that they would pursue him to lobby on our behalf. Okay, now this is something that I will ask the rest of our viewers in the avenue to help us get additional support. Okay, we have Katie back. Okay, I'm sorry about that, Katie. Okay, now what I did while you were gone, I went through the letter that you sent to the bishop, and I read some excerpts from it, and I mean, this was absolutely brilliant. This afternoon, I made an appointment with the Monsignor at my parish, and I'm going to show him this letter, and we're gonna go ahead and pursue this. So I want to take just time to thank you for joining us. I want to follow your story, and if the opportunity presents itself, I'd like to have you back on again, and certainly let's bring your sister Leah in as well when we get back together again. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for your time. All right, friends. The last order of business here. I was very, very gratified by the amount of assistance and the interest that was shown when we started the GoFundMe page to help finance the cost of doing the podcast. It was very heartwarming, the response we got. But as is the nature of things like this, it tends to plateau out after a while. So I'm going to repost. Can we bring up the link for the GoFundMe, please? I'm going to bring this up again, and any assistance that can be offered, no amount is too small. Anything we can do to help defray our costs would be greatly, greatly appreciated. And also, I want to mention, Daryl Parrott with his billboard campaign. I believe he has the one billboard in Jacksonville right now. Sophia, can we bring that up? I think this is brilliant. This is a very powerful way to get our message across. Governor DeSantis was so proud of the moniker, the free state of Florida. Well, I doubt that he feels the same about the free kill state of Florida. And it took a lot of cojones for Daryl to do this. He has been doing this pretty much out of his own pocket. Any assistance that we can find for him would be greatly appreciated as well. So thank you all very much. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm sorry my voice is going out again. But, we are going into the 37th year of this horrible, horrible law, and our resolve is not diminished. We are going to come back. We're going to come back smarter, and we're going to come back stronger. Please continue to support us. Please like, follow, and share. Share the story with people. Remember now, this does not only affect people in the state of Florida. If someone visits the state of Florida and they fit the profile, older than 25, single, no dependent children, and they die of medical negligence in a Florida hospital, they are subject to the same horrible, horrible law. So share this across the nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching The Fight Against Free Kill Laws with Ed Salazar, where we interview those who have dealt firsthand with medical malpractice. Families are devastated by medical malpractice and left with no justice. This isn't just a loophole. It's a failure to protect the ones we love. It's time to change the law. It's time for accountability. Contact your state legislatures, visit afreekill.com for more information on how to help, or contact Ed at 561-239-2417. Because every life should matter.
You're listening to A Fight Against Free Kill Laws from AMP Media Production.